order. It's everybody to find their seats, and hopefully we get everybody out of here in a good amount of time as compared to our previous cases. So with that, I'll call to order the October 3rd Metro Water Services Stormwater Management Commission. My name is Kabir Sandhu. I serve as chair of this board, and looking forward to an efficient meeting today. So with that, I'll open it up to the first item on our agenda. Actually, I need to back up. We have a new member on this commission, long awaited. Ms. Fiona Halter is joining us today. She is a licensed engineer, and I'd like to give her a moment to say a couple words of her background and so on.
I feel like I'm on a game show. Hi, my name is Fiona Halter Abbott, actually married recently. I have been in the built environment for over 20 years, registered civil engineer, managed highway crews, did a little bit of stormwater design, but mainly in corporate and real estate development. And I've been in Nashville 17 years and love the city. So very honored to serve.
We were thrilled to have you. So thank you. Okay, with that, we will jump right in. And customarily, our first item of business is to review and approve or edit our decision letters and meeting minutes from our prior meeting. Customary for us to do that in a public forum, so I'll let the commissioners take a moment to do that, and I'll entertain a motion when anyone is ready.
Second.
We have a motion from Mr. Fuller to move for approval, and seconded by Ms. Simpson. All in favor? All right, excuse me, any discussion?
And just, is it approval of the minutes and the decision letters as a joint package?
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. All right, great. I want to point out the second point of our agenda today. We have a couple of deferrals, two cases, the Estes Road case and the Ariza Bellevue case are both deferring to November 7th. Is there anybody in the audience here that's associated with those cases? If you could raise your hand. Yes, okay. All right, so I just want to give you a heads up on that we will not be discussing any components of that case, so sorry that didn't get to you sooner.
Quick question. We had, Wogan had sent out an email with the August minutes as well. Did we have edits to those and not?
There were edits, yeah. There were edits to that in the decision letter for the appeal for the Nashville Gun Club, just to clarify staff's position.
Do we need to take action?
No, I don't think so. It was just a notification that it had been changed.
Yeah, I previously made a motion on it in the last meeting that basically approval with contingent on making those updates.
Okay. All right, well, with that, we're going to move on to our cases that are to be heard today. The first case on the agenda is the Nashville Gun Club. If the applicant could come to the podium here while Logan introduces the case.
Opening statement to the applicant. If you are not satisfied with the decision made by the Stormwater Management Commission, you may appeal the decision by filing for a writ of certiorari with the Davidson County Chancery or Circuit Court. Your appeal must be filed within 60 days of the date of the Commission's decision. You are advised to seek the independent advice of legal counsel to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements have been satisfied. Case number 1 on the agenda, case 2024-00026, Nashville Gun Club preliminary at 1100 County Hospital Road. APN is 069-0000-6800. Inspector is NPDES, Council District 1, Joy Kimbrough. Applicant's request, disturbance of the floodway to construct a building and provide compensating cut, continuous mowing and maintenance of portions of the floodway, waiver of buffer signage is necessary, allowance of stormwater control measures within the floodway. Appellant is Nashville Gun Club, represented by Andrew Walters, Catalyst Design Group, Comments. Stormwater staff. Staff has consistently recommended to applicants and to the commission that encroachments to the Zone 1 buffer for structures and/or parking areas are highly unadvisable. The applicant's request for this variance proposes a structure located not within the Zone 1 buffer, but entirely within the Cumberland River floodway. Staff does not support this variance request. If the commission is compelled to approve the request, then staff would request that additional mitigation be provided. Per Stormwater Management Manual, Volume 1, Chapter 5, and 44 CFR 60.3, this proposal will require a no-rise analysis prior to submittal of final variance. Per 1564-170 of the Metropolitan Code of Ordinances, this proposal will require a no adverse impact analysis prior to submittal of final variance. Codes, no comment provided. Planning, no comment provided. Greenways is not requesting a greenway and/or greenway easement.
All right. I know the applicant is familiar with the process, but since we have some folks in the audience, I'll go ahead and lay it out. The applicant will have 10 minutes to present. We will close the applicant's presentation, open it up for public hearing. If there's anyone here to speak in favor or against, they'll have 2 minutes at the podium to state their case, and then we'll close public hearing and open it up to the commission for discussion and may have some dialogue back and forth. So with that, the applicant I'll start the clock after the introductions, and we'll hear your case.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Commissioner Abbott. Good to see a new face here. I will try to be brief today because I know I appreciate the commission looking at this third straight month.
If you don't mind to introduce yourself for the record.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
Andrew Walters with Catalyst Design Group and the applicant, civil engineer. And so just a quick summary, and my hope is that everybody in Commissioner Abbott's up to speed on sort of what's transpired to date. But at a recent hearing, we had left with a commitment to evaluate compensatory cut as an alternate option, looking at the floodplain at 413 and what that would do, any new fill in that area, and looking at doing some compensatory cut for future model impacts. We also committed to evaluate the type of foundation the structure may be appropriate. I think there was some comments and questions about that, just in terms of the stability of the structure. And so with that, I wanted just to review sort of the specifics of, the variance requests that were here today. So as the exhibit shows, we've looked around the site. There's some other areas of the site that are less proximate than this, but really, I think just their proximity to Riley didn't make sense to do excavation. This area did. There's some areas between these trap stations that seem to make sense and to grab some of this material. So what we've done here is just based on the aerial topo, we've done a quick little grading exhibit. We're estimating about 2,000 yards could be pulled in out from that area as compensatory cut. And we're committing today to do at least a 2-to-1 ratio of future fill above the 413. And so that's one of the recommendations I think this group had was to evaluate that. If we go back to the stormwater solution that we had, the other exhibit, and I believe this reflects, again, just to kind of recap where we were presenting last time, we are going to propose to take this site down to a 0.4 RV, which would be the normal standard in terms of it's an existing paved lot. And so recognizing that, as Logan mentioned, this entirety is in the mapped floodway, so we're recognizing that this would need variance approval for those components. And I don't remember how much time we really spent looking at this, but we are proposing urban bio boxes that sit sort of up at that 415 elevation. So again, that's 4.5 feet above the current floodplain. And then we are proposing to take some of the pavement out and replace that with grass pave or permeable pavers. And with that, we'd make a commitment to get to that 0.4 RV, which would be the normal standard. I think the caveat is that this would technically be in that floodway graphical limit line that we've discussed before. And then the third thing, we talked about specialty foundation design. We are looking at doing spread footings with redundant rock anchors to provide additional protection against buoyancy and scour. And I know that was a question I think that Ms. Camp had raised last time, and certainly if there's questions for Lillard, that's his area of expertise. as we go forward. And then no rise analysis. This is something that I think staff has been very concerned about, and so are we. And so we actually reached out to WSP at the recommendation of Patrick Dobbs. I guess it's formerly Wood, formerly AMEC. You may remember they've gone through a few name changes. But had a conversation with their floodplain modeler, and they actually looked at the model of the Cumberland in this area, and they agree with sort of our interpretation. But in fact, the email I got back, he noted that it's common during mapping to fill in the small holes and gaps in the floodplain, but one this large should not have been filled, and the split floodway should have been mapped here. And that's his opinion looking at it. He did recommend that as we do the no rise, that he get some additional cross sections just to confirm that berm condition does stay. Because if you've ever seen a floodplain model, they don't model every 50 or 100 feet. They have pretty wide stretches of cross sections that they take. But he was pretty confident that even if we get those cross sections, that the model would indicate a clear no rise, which again, we've logically presented that. We've discussed that in this group, that if we're sitting 4.5 feet above the current floodplain, it stands to reason that any work that we do up there would not be causing an adverse impact. He agrees, but we are committed to study that as a part of the recommendations, and I think that was part of staff's recommendation as we come back for final. And then just a reminder too, I know our initial plan talked about vegetative planting along the riverbanks, but I think we discussed last time not including that. There was a joint discussion and everybody agreed that that was not part of the plan. So just to summarize, we're requesting preliminary variance approval for the floodway buffer encroachment with the conditions that will provide a minimum or 2-to-1 compensatory cut amount over the 413 floodplain elevation. That's the future elevation. And we're agreement to provide a no-rise analysis demonstrating no adverse impact as part of our final buffer approval. And then we will do the specialty foundations, and we can share more details about that as we come back for final with spread footings and the redundant rock anchors. And then also just making sure that we approve, if we're headed towards approval, we'd like to make sure that we solidify the approval of the strategy for stormwater treatment. So with that, I'll be quiet, reserve the rest of my time for Q&A. And I appreciate everybody's service to this body. Thank you.
Great, thank you. With that, I'll close the applicant's presentation and open up for public comment. Is there anybody here to speak in favor or against? If you could, please come to the podium. All right, seeing none. Logan, have we received any letters or notifications of any form?
No, we didn't receive anything on this case.
All right, so with that, I'll close public hearing and open it up for discussion. And we'll start with, this case has been before us. I think this is the third time today as a preliminary. So appreciate the applicant's ability or the willingness to have dialogue back and forth to see how we can work to a solution. But with that, I'll open it up for the discussion.
And in an effort to not, I feel like we've gone around a couple times, but what I'm seeing that's different this time is they analyzed it to the future elevation. Not the 411. They went to the 413 and provide 2-to-1 cut.
Yeah.
And so if we approve this building to be in a floodway that is permissible in a floodway or made that determination, then I'm looking at it more of a building in a floodplain, and they meet the compensation. And then the rest of the disturbance is really, to my understanding, to meet stormwater regulations and to incorporate water quality for the rooftop being introduced. And so I think that it's fair, as long as they're comfortable as designers, making sure that, paver water coming up under pavers could be a problem. Grass pavers probably a great solution, but that's their design, their insurance.
So with that, can I ask the staff, there was a comment about additional mitigation being discussed that was not incorporated in the plan submitted, or is what you see a reflection of what staff had requested?
I have to admit, I'm not entirely sure at which iteration of plan that comment was submitted, since this has been back 3 times, but that was one of the things that had been mentioned. Obviously, they're in a sensitive area that's theoretically the floodway, but it is elevated. Normally, LID is not allowed in the floodplain because of inundation concerns and the impact on LID. This one, I guess, is a higher elevation, so we were just hoping that if it was going to be approved, that there could be as much water quality as possible added in based on the added imperviousness of the site. So, I mean, it looks like they have added some infiltration boxes and some amount of pervious pavers. I think it would be on Andrew and them to look at the design and whether or not they would function. Obviously, if you've got groundwater coming into those, that could be an issue, but given the elevation, that would be on them to evaluate.
And I know the staff last time had some comments about the mitigation in the river bank. Have we addressed that? I know that there were some concerns of it being appropriate for that being a rock bluff, I think.
I think the discussion was whether or not to leave it as a rock bluff with the riprap lining or to go to a vegetative. And I think the conversation was that that's not a solution that you guys have been crazy about supporting.
Yeah, I think they withdrew that as mitigation because it's kind of like the parks project we reviewed. It's quite the undertaking.
Yeah.
And the parks is spending several $1 million to do riprap.
Right. Yeah.
I'd
Okay.
like to take a different approach.
Just want to make sure that was addressed.
We second Michael's summary there, that we have 0.8 acres of what is currently asphalt pavement or impervious surface that we're going to essentially be netting out to roof leaders that go down to urban bio and to grass pave. So we're looking at that as part of our net effect and then also the compensating cut. So that's how we had interpreted the staff's comment in terms of providing additional measures.
Okay.
Maybe, if I might, maybe a better way to couch this is what's proposed on this plan what would be required normally for a grading permit site, or would this be a little bit additional water quality treatment than what would otherwise be required?
Yeah, without having run the final numbers on this, I think we are confident that what we're showing here would at least get us down to 0.4, which would normally be the standard for treatment practices. But I think that can be achieved in a number of ways that don't necessarily reflect a net reduction of 0.8 acres of impervious to pervious. So I guess I would say it's both and. I would say it's a simultaneous benefit that we would be able to achieve the 0.4 RV by doing this net reduction of impervious.
And getting back to the bank, is the proposal of this project to leave the bank completely alone?
Yes.
Okay.
That's right. And especially anything below that blue line, which is the 411 floodplain limit now. If we do show a deck there just graphically, so that deck may sort of extend or cantilever out. But as far as impact or disturbance to that floodplain elevation, there would be no disturbance below that line.
But the site's going to meet regulations, and the mitigation is double the cut of the future floodplain
That's right.
elevation, not the current.
That's right. That's the intent.
Okay. I know, Mr. Misch, you had a comment as well.
Just to add to what Mr. Hunt was saying over there, we routinely see the commission disapprove robust mitigation plans when a zone 1 buffer is requested. So I think the comment, it's more so because this isn't a floodway. We see a robust plan come in for a zone 1, then it should be, I don't know what the best word is, a super duper robust plan if a disturbance to the floodway is requested. And as far as water quality, Metro Water, we strive on doing a lot of water quality on our properties. And we did have some problems with some pavers on one of our properties that we've had to replace after a flood. So I appreciate the request to do pavers. As you suggested, or I think Vice Chair Fulmer suggested, it could become a potential mitigation, not mitigation, but potential maintenance issue in the future. So just wanted the applicant and the commission to be aware.
I wanted to follow up on staff's comment. I think I have been clear on my position the last couple of meetings on this. This to me is a very exceptional request in the floodway, and my commissioners may disagree with me, but we, or at least since I've been on this commission, we rarely allow any building in a zone 1. And I agree that when we're even considering it, it is a very robust mitigation plan. I have been very clear that building in a floodway is concerning to me, especially in light of flooding that we have previously seen in Nashville, the growth that we've had. And I still see this in a floodway as I sit here today. I also, I believe, had asked if there were other places that this could be built within the property as a part of a different sort of plan. I haven't heard anything whether that was possible or not, but the other thing that we have to follow is our regulations. And one of those is a determination that the granting of variance will not result in increased flood heights. What I'm being told is there hasn't been a no-rise analysis. That's a part of what they're asking to do in the future. As I sit here today as a commissioner, maybe do not have the knowledge of other commissioners, but I can't make a determination that there isn't going to be an increase in flood heights. And because of that, I cannot vote to approve this particular request. I also did not really see the exceptional hardship in this case. So those are kind of my initial thoughts. I haven't really changed my opinion. I do appreciate the applicants coming back, giving different solutions, but I don't think those change my initial concerns from the previous hearings.
But to be clear, this is still a preliminary, and we're not voting.
Okay.
They will have to provide that information.
Fair enough.
For the vote, for the final.
It's still outside of, even with the no rise, I still do not see the same exceptional hardship. I know that we're not necessarily voting, but it's a preliminary, so I'm communicating kind of what my thoughts are on the process. So
I'll add one comment about the floodway component, and that's maybe for staff. Have we ever had a case where we've had a site that was above the 100-year floodplain elevation that was designated as floodway?
If there is, they're far and few apart. Typically, it doesn't happen. There are some outliers that may occur.
Yeah.
So it very well may happen more than we know. We just don't have people that come to us requesting stuff like this in the floodway.
And for me personally, that's just kind of the unique differentiator of the term floodway and this site, considering its elevations versus, I'll just say a broad FEMA map. I appreciate the applicant's communication with the firm that did the mapping. It'd be good if maybe that could be submitted as part of the record to have that clarification of it. Likely should have been a split floodway designation in this area, but for it to be analyzed on that finite element basis is not typical.
Yeah, and as Commissioner Fulmer mentioned, that would certainly be our intent. As we come back for final approval, we would want that. We would present all that data, and again, for the vote. We candidly, if there is a rise, we're not going to come back before you. If there's an impact to the floodway, we're not going to come back before you. We're going to withdraw the request. So I think that's the step that we want to take. We just, before we spend those dollars and advance the design to the point where it makes sense to come back for the final, we would just like to sort of have some head nods that, hey, that's the right direction, and if we can get that flood study done in the no rise, then.
But we already voted that this structure could be there, whether it's floodway, if it is floodway. And I'm thinking about it in the future flood elevation instead of the current, just because it's going to change. And we voted it could be there.
we did not vote. That it was not what the initial vote was on. The initial vote was whether something could come before us to request a variance. It was not that we voted that could be there. The initial vote that we had, if it is in a floodway and it doesn't meet an exception, it cannot come before this particular commission. We have no authority to grant any sort of relief. So the initial vote was, did it meet an exception that would allow it to come before this commission to then allow us to do our normal analysis as to whether we would grant them a variance. So I want to be clear on what that initial vote was.
Go ahead.
I just want to echo that that's correct. The initial vote that came before us was not as whether this can actually be here. It's whether this body has the authority to even get to the point that we are at right now.
Correct, and maybe let me help me clarify my thinking of this also for Commissioner Fulmer. It could come to us because it fell into the category for which the exceptions were allowed for a structure to be within the floodplain. However, the second part of that, which is our discussion today, is ensuring that there's no adverse impact. And maybe a couple others that I'm not.
No, without relief from this particular body, it cannot be built. Period is the way I read the regs. So unless, and that is ultimately why it's coming before us. If we had not made a determination that it fell into the exemption associated with the recreational fields, that analysis would have stopped there. They could never build this particular building. So again, now it's coming back before us, and we are looking at this as it would be any other variance request coming before us. In this case, it's in a floodway. Usually it's a zone 1 or zone 2 buffer disturbance. So that's kind of the difference here.
If I could add maybe a context, and I maybe appreciate legal's perspective on this. I think the section of the ordinance that we came back initially for on the appeal was specifically to place a structure in the floodway. So if you do that thought exercise, I think one of the conversations that we had during that first appeal was if we had multiple structures that all fit the same programming elements here, right? We did 4 buildings instead of 1. We would have then still had to come back to Commissioner Simpson's point to get a buffer reduction. And in this case, if it's in the floodway, I think that's the part I think where Chairman Fulmer, Vice Chair Fulmer is making that what's here before you really is a variance to the buffer, but the structure itself by the appeal met the exceptions, I think is what the group voted on. So it is an interesting thought exercise, because it's like if we came back before you for 4 different structures that were all in the floodway, well, in that case, obviously the buffer is 0. So what we're really talking about is what are the effective mitigation efforts that are needed for a 0-foot buffer. And I think that's how we've looked at it, and I don't know if that fits with, but the specifics of that section of the ordinance specifically say that it's a question of whether a structure is allowed in the floodway, not the floodplain, but in the floodway. And that's what we won the appeal on. So, and again, now it has conditions with it, but that's how we interpret it.
I mean, I don't think that's the point of why we're here today, but I do want to right the ship, because I don't want to get us in uncharted waters, and I want to be clear. The code is a hard stop, no new structure in the floodway, period. You are not allowed to build in the floodway unless you can meet these conditions. So let's start there. Mm-hmm. It's a no. The reason why it came before your body is because if they met that exception, then you could hear it. If they didn't meet that exception, their only recourse would have been to go to court and to fight the ordinance, okay? So they've cleared the hurdle that you can hear it, but we're starting all over. You can hear it, but you still have to go through the same exercise as you would go through with every other case. So they're not in any better position than they would be for any variance that walks in the door. It's just that now you have a case before you that otherwise you would not have. Okay, so typically the reason why you don't see floodway cases is because you're not authorized to see them. The code says you can't see them because you can't build there. So you have to start from that premise. And I want to recognize our new commissioner, because she's been trying to get in on this.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I'm a little late
Yes.
to this discussion, I know. So I'm going to ask some remedial questions just to clarify. The elevations on this site, have they changed over time at all?
Well, that's a very loaded and a long answer. Yes. Back in the 90s, this site was used for a big dredging operation where a lot of the site was excavated, and a lot of the material, like 430,000 plus.
478,000 yards of material.
Some of us were still around then.
Yeah, to the landfill. So basically, everything on the site that was above the.
Can you hit your microphone, please?
I usually don't need a microphone. So
On record.
It's okay,
everything that was dredged at the time of original construction, they took everything that is now below, down to the 100-year flood and below. All of that material that was taken, everything that could be taken was, and the only thing that remains above is the primary access into this berm along the river, and there is.
Let me clarify. There's not been any recent fill on
Yeah,
the site.
it hasn't changed since
Okay.
mid-nineties.
And this is
Okay,
a state-owned property, and so that's where all of that work, and a lot of the work for the vertical structure was all done part of the state approval process, so.
And remind me what the building use is, I apologize,
It
is
is half of the building, a little over half, is an open-air pavilion for events, award ceremonies and that sort of thing. And then the other half is supporting structure, concessions, storage. I forget everything that goes into that. And the appeal that was granted was because the building met the exceptions that are in that ordinance for.
And is there so 411 is the
Do you have that
floodplain?
cross-section?
And during construction, do you have an area disturbance exhibit that?
Yeah,
was
it would probably
submitted?
be about that 0.8 acres that now with the limited cut, it may grow a little bit. That's a little different part of the site.
But it's above the 411?
That's right. All of the work that's why I was going to say that cross-section exhibit from one of our previous, if you still have that in the files, that may be a helpful graphic just to show, but yes, there you go. So all of the red line represents the 411, which is the current mapped floodplain limit. And that's the comment that I made earlier from the floodplain modeler. He's noting that because this island is so long, normally he would see FEMA map this. I think it was just that it only had a couple of cross sections here, and so whoever did the mapping just decided to pull the floodway all the way through the island. Now, again, with more cross sections and a more detailed analysis, that's what we hope to come back with the no rise and just demonstrate that this is sitting above that, and that in actual terms, our building, as you can see, is 4.5 feet above the floodplain / floodway line. And so as far as its actual elevation. And so the drive aisle's at about 413 plus or minus now. And I believe Roger's point at the previous meetings was that the new model is going to be coming out, and that's around a 413 elevation for the floodplain. And so when we talked about the 413 and compensatory cut, we're looking at it through the lens of what the future model is going to be. So we don't want to have an impact even once the.
And so based on the 411, where does the buffer end on this?
Well, that's the part of the challenge. The floodway is a graphic line that's just overlaid on the site, and that goes all the way up to Briley essentially. So
Even though the elevations are not.
correct.
Yeah.
And that's now again from a modeling standpoint and from an elevation data standpoint, it likely stops at the 411. That's what would come back with a no rise and a more detailed assessment. But all indications are from our end and folks that study these is that floodway would stop at or below the floodplain. That's
So if it's at
typically
411, where would it stop on this graph?
It's so steep that it's probably right at the 411
Okay.
in these embankments. I mean, if you look at any floodway map, typically the floodway is several feet, depending on the slope and topography of the site. In this case, because it's so steep, we've kind of just said, hey, the floodway and the floodplain from an actual elevation standpoint is likely at that 411. And that's what we're saying. Our commitment is to not disturb anything below that at this time. Everything would be filled above at the parking lot level, as you see there.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to recognize Mr. Lindsay. I know he was at the podium a moment ago.
Yeah, we've had multiple discussions with the Corps of Engineers. Barry Moran is the primary modeler for all of our work. And we've had discussions about this concept of a split floodway. And Barry pretty steadfastly stands on the fact that he would not have modeled it with a split floodway to start with. And were he to model it again today, it would not be modeled with a split floodway. So, and again, we know that the base flood elevation is going to rise by two plus feet. And so there will be modifications to the model. That model will be finalized in the next 2 months. The preliminary maps will take longer to develop. They'll probably exist first as a Corps of Engineers map, readable from a GIS application. So we know there are changes coming. We appreciate that your proposal is to recognize those new elevations and your final elevations and things like that. I think that's important. There's not a buffer in this area. Because the way it's modeled, I appreciate Mr. Teasley's reminding us of how many cubic yards were removed in the 90s, but that's not germane either, because the most, the models, the updating is done. They're done kind of in piecemeal fashion in some cases, but we've got new maps that were issued in 2017, or actually in 2001. They were updated again in 2017. The most current of the map revisions occurred earlier this year. So we're constantly updating those models and maps. So it's really not germane, what amount of fill was removed in the 1990s, because the more current maps, and then certainly the new maps that'll be coming out later this year, will have no bearing on what happened before 1990. They'll be based on what the conditions are in the field today.
And we agree with that.
So.
We don't take any exception to that. We've based all of this on the current maps that are available, so.
The only point of saying that we gave the 478,000 yards is that everything that could be taken down has been taken down, and we've done an exhaustive search to try to find an alternative area within the property, and there's nothing there.
There's not a lot of areas left, yeah.
There's nothing left. There's one area that is a hump, but it's all Indian graves.
And I think that answers my question. So there isn't a place on this property that wouldn't have to come before this commission for approval.
That is correct.
I think that's right.
Okay, and I'll remind the commission this is a preliminary approval, so are there any other conditions, it's a preliminary case, and are there any other conditions that we need to add to this in order to provide guidance to the applicant before they come back for a potential final? Okay. Sometimes we do a motion, sometimes we don't on preliminaries. Is there a preference by staff of whether we need to memorialize any of that through a motion, or?
I don't think you need a motion because you're not making a vote. You're not voting to approve or disapprove. You're just sort of giving them guidance of what you want to see at the next meeting.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, from our end, we would appreciate as much clarity and certainty as the commission can give us in terms of the outline that we framed here as far as what we're pursuing, just so we don't misstep and spend time and resources in the wrong direction. So.
I do know one of our commissioners who's not here today, you discussed the footings. So I think making sure that we kind of have clear understanding of what you're proposing there with the plan, I think would be helpful based on her last comments.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
And the other thing, again, I think what we are seeing is the 411. I know that you all have reanalyzed with the 413. So if that's kind of what we were looking at, I think having maybe an updated sort of plan based on the 413 would be helpful. So we're looking at apples to apples instead of, looking at the 411 and trying to figure out where the 413 might be.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mr. Chairman, if
yes,
I might, I guess at some point, if you boil this down, it becomes a buffer disturbance. And I think I would just reiterate what we normally tell applicants, which is the degree to which you're within a buffer, think in terms of providing equal or greater offset to the benefit that that buffer would provide. I know we talked a little bit about quality and those measures. So if you think in terms of mitigation, that is the normal standard that we give applicants, equal or greater offset of the area in the buffered and disturbed.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. All right, with that, is there anything else that we need to discuss regarding this case from the commission? Okay, applicant, anything else you'd like to hear from us?
We'd love to hear a motion and again, some certainty that we're heading down the right direction, but I understand that that's not a requirement at this stage.
Yeah.
But again, we don't want to invest the time. And the next step for us would be develop final drawings. As you can imagine, those in the AEC industry, that's a substantial investment for the gun club, not just in our fees and Willard's fees for structural design, but architectural. So, I mean, I think if we're heading that direction, we'd appreciate at least a vote of confidence or not of confidence that we're heading in the right direction, at least with the group here.
I mean, would it be helpful as an interim step? And I know the no-rise study is not an inexpensive endeavor, but to submit that and then get a better idea before you proceed to see these?
Well, if you're cutting more than you're filling, based on a future elevation, then it seems that it wouldn't be a rise, but more of the no adverse getting a no adverse statement makes us feel better, I think. But really, it's the degree of mitigation. And, you know, I saw 2 to 1 based on future elevations. So is that 5 to 1, 10 to 1, you know, based on current cuts? I don't know. But
we can certainly analyze it.
I think that's the kind of the big thing that I've heard. I know that not everybody's going to be on the same page on the rehearing. Brittany's already saying she's going to vote no, but
Well,
we'll win her over.
and that's why we are a commission. We don't always have to agree
That's right.
on things, and we just want to be. I want to be as open and honest, so you all know, because I understand that you all are spending money on this, and I don't want to lead you astray in any way as to where I'm leaning.
yeah.
So
We get hung up on these metrics sometimes, and so 2 to 1 as far as offsetting cut, that in my mind that's helpful when it comes to flooding. I mean, we got huge rains the other day. I've been to the site. It's not that great of a parking lot. I mean, right now when it rains, there's a lot of gravel and dirt being thrown in the river. So anything we're doing to help that, in my mind, also is helpful. So it's just tricky. I wish I could tell you a ratio, but
Well, I think that
it's also limiting.
Yeah.
I mean, you can only cut so much. You can't cut below the 2-year. So a lot of that site's below that.
Yeah, I think the 2 years at 400.2, something like that. So we'd stop the grading down at that level. So.
Yeah.
But no, we appreciate. Zeph, did you have? I see your mic's on.
It is on. Go ahead, finish. I can add.
No, I say if that's what we have, then we will do that. We'll take the next step and do the no rise, which again, there's some cost there. We just want to be sure that we're headed in the right direction with that. So.
Yeah, I was just going to add what Ms. Simpson kind of explained earlier is, and you explained a number of things today. I think we just need to make sure that we have that information memorialized so that we can understand where it's coming from. Obviously, staff has similar information that says something different, so I think we just need to make sure that we're really clear on, I think the floodplain, we're calling it the same thing for this one, is a big question. And so if you're making the case and have documentation that it's not, then I think we need to see that, and likewise to be able to, we would just have to be really sure on the information we have and the decision we're making and why.
Cool. Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate everybody.
See you in a month or two, or whenever. Probably not in a month, yeah. I just caught myself on that. All right, folks. Does anybody need a break? A quick one? Okay, good. All right, with that, we'll move to the next case. And if the applicant could go ahead and come on to the podium. This is the Harris Neely's Bend Road case. And as they're coming to the podium, I'll let Logan introduce the case.
Case number 2 on the agenda, case 2024-00029, 1430 Neely's Bend Road at 1430 Neely's Bend Road. APN is 063-000-16700. Inspector is DS Single Family, Council District 9, Tanya Hancock. Applicant's request, allowance of a 4-sided box culvert for a stream crossing, continuous mowing and maintenance of portions of the stream buffer, waiver of buffer signage as required, allowance of a gravel driveway within the buffer, allowance per professional engineer to stamp the landscape mitigation plan. Appellant is Glenn Harris, represented by Brad Bork, Green LID Design. Comments, Stormwater staff. If a 3-sided box culvert can reasonably be constructed versus the requested 4-sided box culvert, staff would recommend against that particular variance element being granted. MWS has for many years required bottomless culverts or span stream crossings to minimize disturbance of the natural stream bed. This allows for habitat connectivity, permitting wildlife, fish, and vertebrates to access upstream reaches more easily. Buried culverts, while approved by TDEC, attempt to recreate a natural channel but fail at providing equivalent habitat. These systems also are more prone to experience erosion of the newly created stream bed. Span crossings can also allow a stream's natural geomorphology to remain intact, including both substrate and channel structure. Codes, no comment provided. Planning, no comment provided. Greenways is not requesting greenway or greenway easement.
Great. With that, I'll provide some guidance of the procedure. As you saw before, you'll have 10 minutes to present your case. After the introductions are made, then we'll close the presentation, open it up for public comment, and then we'll close public hearing and we'll deliberate. So with that, I'd like for you all to introduce yourselves, and I'll start the 10-minute clock after that.
This is Brad Bork with Greenland Design, I'm a civil engineer, the applicant. We also have the owner of the property here, as well as a representative of the contractor. To represent this, or to explain this project, let's start kind of with a little bit of a history. This was, what's going on is there's an existing gravel road that goes along that stream. The owner was working on a building outside of the floodplain above the ridge there and needed a road, so there's a road now to that, to a house, kind of where that 1430 shown on that screen there, that's about where the house is. When that road was installed, there was a pipe put in, a 24-inch, and then it was had ability to drive over it. That has been, TDEC came out with a violation saying, hey, you need to get a ARAP. We went ahead, that's when we got a call. We applied for an ARAP with a, let's see if I have it, it's a 8x4 box culvert to go over that stream. We checked it for the 10-year storm, and then other storms were overtopping the road, but we're all able to, get it through the road itself. We then applied for a grading permit, which is kind of why we're here today. And there's some additional regulations that was asked for us. We went ahead and did a model of the floodplain, as well as increased the box culvert to 2 16x4s to allow the 100-year storm to pass through that box culvert. All of that was done. So the variances we're asking for are to try to reduce the mediation to the stream at this point. We're looking, less signs. There's an existing road there that you see in that screen that's just going into the buffer. That is why we're asking for some of that variance on the buffer. And then the last part, the big one that's been discussed, is the 4-sided or 3-sided structure. Right now, there is not a natural stream by that road. You can kind of see you can even see the road crossing the stream there in that cut in that picture. So we don't really see a natural bottom that is currently there. And I want to bring up the president of the contractor, it's called Concrete Structures, had a letter here I would like to read that kind of explains a little more of why a 4-sided would be good. This is a letter to detail the reasoning for allowance of a 4-sided structure at this location. During previous utility work at the site, it's determined that bedrock is greater than 8 feet below the stream bed. Excavation to the bedrock at this depth or deeper would not be feasible for the size structure. Therefore, the only reasonable forward is to build a structure on soil material. It is common of mine that the building a 3-sided structure would expose the structure to possible undermining in storm events. Foundation undermining is commonly caused by structure failure due to large storm events. Presents dangerous situations for those who use the structures. The Department of Transportation addressed this issue in their design, guidelines, and specs and standards. It is common practice for TDOT to build a 4-sided structure in this situation. The bottom slat is usually lower below the stream flow elevation to allow natural subsurface material to fill in after the construction. The result of the structure is resilient to undermining due to the water being transported on top of the concrete slab. Also, cut out walls placed on each end of the structure further inhibit undermining. The result of the scour results resistant structure with natural stream channel and material. It is my recommendation to utilize TDOT standard drawings to build a 4-sided structure. Your consideration of this matter is appreciated. So in that, we are also saying that we'll put 6 inches of soil above that four-sided structure on the bottom, so therefore there will be somewhat of a natural stream, not just concrete flowing over. I think that's all I had. I don't know if there's anything else. I'll be willing to listen to your questions.
Okay, great. Is there anybody else on the panel would like to say anything before we close hearing? Okay. All right. With that, none. So I'll close the presentation, open up for public comment. Is there anybody here to speak in favor or against? If so, please raise your hand. All right. Seeing none, we'll close. Logan, did we receive any letters or notifications?
We did not receive any correspondence on this.
All right. Public hearing closed, and I'll open it up for commissioner discussion.
I have a question. So what did you all built the road and then were notified that it was built across the stream? Is that?
That's my understanding.
We had everything. We did not. We out there in the country, we just put a 24-inch across there to build the part that we went to get at the top of the hill. That has kept the level of the water the same on both sides. So the exterior and this 24-inch, state came back and said, the environmental bunch came and said that we needed an 8-foot, 4-foot high across the stream. And then grading came back and said it has to be a 32-foot by 4-foot high across the stream, which I'm a general contractor since 72, retired now. Seems quite unreasonable, the size of that, but we're accepting that so that we can comply with everything we can, but it's not reasonable. We put our sewer across it, we put the water across it, we got conduit for NES is going across it within the wood, dirt. So we've already got those things done because we had no idea out there that would be an issue. We just never thought of it. The environmentalists found nothing on our side of the stream that would be more than a mosquito larva. That was all they said. So they had no other things going on there. So we felt like, as an old contractor, I just felt like it was excessive. Our problem is downstream where it's blocked up. We have a 6 to 8 foot culvert, some 1,000 feet or so downstream, that is on private property. It was an easement going across part of Metro's sewer on one hand, and then another side was private property, and Metro, of course, refuses to clean that out. And over the years, the trees have died and the limbs have fallen in, and it's just completely blocked that up. And that's why we have water at all. Metro did clean out the part was at the sewer plant, and when they cleaned it out, it went way down to just a small stream, maybe a 3-foot channel that it went down to. But all the water coming down brought all the limbs and all the garbage and everything down, plugged it up. Within 2 weeks, it was plugged again. So that's kind of the issue. We think that just some way we need some help on that private property, but it is private property, so we can't.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that clarification.
I have a comment.
Sorry, if you don't mind, we've closed public hearing, but I'll ask legal if we can recognize.
Are you part of the team?
He's
I
my
think
son.
if he's
Yeah.
part of the development.
Would you mind coming up to the front? We also, the meetings are recorded, so if you would push the red so it turns red, and so it's on record.
The
And
question.
if you don't mind, introduce yourself and your
Yes.
address, so it's on the record.
My name is Seth Harris, 310 School Pass.
Thanks.
I'm his son. I've been working on it. The question was if we put a road in there, and I don't know if this helps, but there was a pre-existing structure on where you see the bridge right there. It was concrete and blacktop that was collapsed. So I was just wanting to add that.
You mentioned depth of bedrock being pretty deep here for soil
We
board.
know that it's more than 8 feet.
Okay, was that submitted at boring at all in the location?
We don't know how deep it will go. In that area, and the reason we know that is because the sewer goes across right on the edge of this. And it's, goes right through all the water part. And it's got a manhole on each side of us, just on either side. And I would say that the sewer manholes must be within, I'm guessing somewhere around 250 feet, every 250 feet, that goes down through the stream, and water's on top of those manhole covers all the time. Now, several years ago, they came in and put the plastic, or redid the manhole, the sewer, and I think you have a sewer, there's, according to our Tanya, our district person there out there, she says that they're fixing to redo those sewer plants. I think there's 5 of them. We're supposed to be the first one, which is right on the edge of this property, and right on the edge of where this water is all backing up in this 6 to 8 foot culvert, whatever it is down there. And that's our issue. And we wouldn't have a problem at all. We would not have water going, but very little tiny stream going across our property if it stayed cleaned out. But it is on private property for 15 or so years. It's been there a long time.
Yeah.
The culvert is there existing.
Thank you. I guess I was just wanting a little more information because that was cited in that letter that you wrote of a potential issue because of depth of bedrock is so.
Yeah, and if you read that, I'll read it again. It says, during previous utility work at the site, it was determined bedrock was greater than 8 feet. So when they were looking at utilities, that's when they kind of noticed where the rock was sitting.
Yeah, so getting a 3-sided to bear on anything would be difficult. Okay. I just didn't know if you had submitted any borings or anything.
No, I don't think there was any borings, but it was probably during construction they could see where the bedrock was kind of lying.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of plan or section that shows this? Is it more because the top of bank to top of bank is 30-some feet, or I'm struggling to
Are you talking about a
visualize
cross section of like where's the floodway and all that?
Just the crossing. So you put a 24-inch pipe in. I'm assuming you filled up to that. I don't know if it had big wing walls, and then you said that you mentioned a 32-foot span.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's to span the high water mark.
It's not to span the high water mark, it's to have enough void space to allow the water to pass through there. It's a 100-year storm can get through 32 by 4. We did 2 16s, which adds up to 32. The fill, to help with the fill part of it, the nice thing is when you add a bigger hole, you have less fill on the actual floodplain. And we did have a cut balance in here. It says, it's in the plans. Let's see if I can get it. Currently, we're filling about 278 cubic yards. And then we have grading here on our plan showing us how we're going to remove or cut open that a little bit more to allow, and the fill will be the cut is 232. So we're a little bit, our net is actually 68. We're actually cutting 68 more cubic yards than is currently there. And that was before the road, if that makes sense.
Mr. Chairman, can I?
This is,
the designer behind this.
Yes.
Yeah, he is, so.
You're welcome to come here, sir.
That works. It's just the side width.
I'm Quentin Highwood, Green the Design. I'm the designer on this. I can answer the question why 32 feet of span is needed more. We did a hydraulic model to base on the 100-year floodplain and not to increase it over a foot. And so that we determined by the cross sections that it needs to be 32 feet of span, 4 foot of rise with a 6-inch embedment depth.
Thank you. Staff have any opinions on this one? I see Mr. Michu shaking his head.
Thank you, Chair. I did want to comment before the applicant had a chance to, that obviously they provided a hardship, or what they consider a hardship. When staff reviewed this and saw that there was a 4-sided box culvert, we did not see that a hardship was here, and we have routinely allowed only 3-sided culverts the entire time. I don't recall if anybody's ever come for a 4-sided before, maybe once or twice, but usually we head them off and say, hey, unless you have an exceptional hardship, you don't really have an opportunity for a variance. So my first comment would be, staff doesn't really believe there's a hardship, and therefore the commission should really consider whether the applicant provided a hardship or not, so that way you could actually hear whether a 4-sided versus 3-sided is permissible. So I guess that was our first comment is, 3-sided box culverts are always built in Metro, and we didn't feel that the applicant provided a hardship on why a 4-sided should be allowed. Obviously, that's up to the commission to decide.
So if they put a footer down the middle of this thing and do open bottom, is that a variance?
A 3-sided crossing that meets the permissible buffer disturbances would not require a variance. So if it was 3-sided and it was within 15 degrees, then it would not require a variance. Then you'd only be here listening to continuous mowing and maintenance and the buffer sign waiver and the mitigation by the engineer.
Yeah, this one's just weird. It's like a little pond, kind of. That's going to ask about
that. Yeah.
And that pond is from the blockage that you're speaking of, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Basically, and I might say that we're taking all the water, stormwater, off of all those properties up above the school, all the way from the little market up there, and about 3 or 4 subdivisions and new subdivisions that's gone in, and all that stormwater is coming down on us, and it ponds there. Like I say, there's nothing live other than the mosquito thing on our side. We just have 200 feet that we're dealing with, and it's, like I said, for an old contractor, it's quite unreasonable, but that's the way it is.
And
so we're ready to do whatever you say.
And everything north of that, going up to the schools and the MAPCO, all have concrete bottoms.
All of them, road crossings.
I know 2 out of 3 do have concrete bottoms.
So I'm assuming that's a constructability issue also. So you've got there's algae bloom. So this water's been standing for, in the photos at least that we have in our case packet, there's algae bloom. So this water's been sitting here for a while. And so from a means and method standpoint, not that that's necessarily a means for hardship for this body, but what you're essentially saying is that there would have to be a significant dewatering operation and almost a cofferdam situation potentially in order to construct a foundation at mid-span to support this bridge if it was 3-sided, because you wouldn't be able to, well, maybe you could, yeah, you probably could span 30 feet with steel beams.
Yes,
it would go from concrete to steel.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the, just digging it out would be a significant issue with the stream.
And that would be more disturbance in the stream.
Yes. Yeah, it would be more disturbance in the stream than just
Yeah,
pouring a concrete bottom.
you would just be designing the foundations for this bearing capacity and,
Yes.
you know, so. I mean, I see the predicament. I see, so TDEC, let me make sure I understand this from staff. So TDEC accepts four-sided box culverts. And generally the reason why Metro does not prefer them is from a ecological standpoint and water quality standpoint.
So I'll speak a little bit, and Michael, correct me if I'm mistaken, but a lot of times we require the three-sided versus the four-sided is because it provides instant ability for critters from one side to the other side to manage, and it doesn't provide a break in ecological effects. The alternative would be to do the TDEC way and submerge it, and then you have to wait for enough sediment to come in here to fill it up to create that continuousness. But provided that they're requesting gravel drive, maybe it fills up much quicker than average. But it's usually an ecological reasoning on what the three-sided is preferred.
And just so you all know, we try and look at the bigger picture. Unfortunately, there's nothing we as a body can do about your downstream condition that's causing some of the issues that you've explained. And what we have to be sure of is whatever we're reviewing today doesn't create that in the future, that hopefully that gets mitigated and fixes your issues, and whatever's coming down, we want to make sure has free flow and doesn't cause any adverse condition for anybody upstream. And the three-sided, I think, just to echo that, allows that stream to function in a more natural way than to have to allow it to get there eventually with a concrete bottom. So that's why I think we always look at those as the best option, so that we're trying to allow that to continue through there in a more effective way, and to try and allow that ecology to persist as much as it can without being as disturbed and without having to fill that void in that gap. So just try and
Just the fact that it is all stormwater, and there's no indication that there's anything other than stormwater. There's no anything that would come except stormwater. And so on our side, the environmentalists found nothing that was viable for hurting anything of that nature.
I'd like to go ahead, Commissioner Abbott.
I was just, because it does look like it's sitting, is this, I'm just trying to understand, it's mapped, so it is a stream, but it's typically dry outside of what has happened downstream. And I guess one of the questions that was asked is the question of hardship, and just trying to clarify, because I didn't see that in the packet as well. Has the staff, because structurally, and then the impact to the stream, to put in the three-sided, and then the fact that there may, I'm not sure where, I'm not the construction person here, but being rock being so deep, has that ever been submitted as a hardship? And I guess there's two parts to this. That's one. And then the second part of this is, I know you mentioned putting soil, and I don't know, on top of the bottom, instead of waiting for it to fill up, or putting some natural habitat. I don't know if that actually would hold. Yeah, that's what I mean. I don't know how fast moving the water is during a flood event or a storm event. So I guess 1 and 2.
I would suggest that if you're going to consider doing a four-sided box culvert, that I would follow the TDEC requirements on that and probably not allow them to artificially fill the bottom up. So our preference is obviously to uphold the stormwater regulations. If the board feels that if the commission feels that there's a extenuating hardship and appropriate mitigation to allow a four-sided, then I think the recommendation would be to follow TDEC's guidance on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to build on, if you don't mind, I want to work towards a motion here pretty quickly. I want to build on Commissioner Abbott's question about the stream and the quality. I know you did a study. Can we talk a little bit more about whether this was determined to be a wet weather conveyance or a stream? And I think it is a stream, and the quality of the stream. There's a hydraulic study, I think, in your packet.
Well, as a layman, not an engineer, I don't think it's a stream. I think it's just rainwater. It's stormwater. And we would not have the problem if it was not blocked up at the other end. So, and you'd have almost nothing there. It would be, my 24-inch pipe would take care of it very well. And most of the time it did until recently. It's backed up. And it's just because all the trees in the area, the area that is wet and everything has died. They keep dropping limbs, they keep falling. So you got a whole large, probably 30 acres in between me and downstream. Well, all that stuff is accumulated and it goes down and it stops up.
Sure. So I want to help you get there, but we got to do it in an objective way, not necessarily a subjective way. And so that's where the hydraulic study and the stream quality, how did it score?
It's in here, it's scored almost a 27. And it says that there's amphibian larvae in there and isopods and amphipods and it's kind of hard to debate. It's not borderline, it's.
Yeah.
I mean,
To follow up, though, I think we would like to hear what your claim for exceptional hardship is in this particular situation. Can you speak to that?
So what's kind of been discussed is, constructability is part of it as well. And right now, like I said, there is currently a pipe there across it. So the natural stream, the natural bottom is not there. So I understand the benefit of a three-sided structure for that use, but that's not what we have here. I think providing like you guys have been talking about, going to TDOC standards where we provide some type of, bedding will be actually a benefit than what's currently there. So our hardship is that the regulation isn't meeting exactly what's going on, and the other hardship is the constructability. We want to limit the disturbance on the stream that's already, so hopefully we keep our constructability down as well and our disturbance.
And to make sure I understand kind of the history, though, the current pipe that is there, it sounds like that was installed without going through the proper channels, correct? Is that, I just understanding that. Yeah.
That's true. I never thought that way out there in acreage that was even an issue. And the water wasn't there when we was doing it. I mean, it was just hardly anything there. But it has grown to.
Okay.
And that's why I never would call it a stream. I call it backwater.
Well, and I understand, and I think what
stormwater.
What our chair was explaining, what we're looking at is what has been designated as a stream, and that's kind of what we're making. But I appreciate and understand your perspective. The one other question I had in the application that you filed, when you all were explaining sort of the sufficient good cause and hardship, you said the drive is already existing, and without the variance, it will cause the drive to be relocated to be outside the buffer.
I think that's the existing driveway.
Okay.
So if you see on that picture, it snakes. Mm-hmm. So part of that snake actually dips into the buffer dips into that. It's like one of the corners. I don't know if our plan is up there, but you can see the buffer crosses another part of the existing drive outside of the floodway.
Okay.
So there's just another little piece that we're just trying not to, next, might be down to the third page. Let's see. So you can see it there. That's our mediation plan, but you see the 2 dashed lines, and then where the trees are, that existing driveway isn't within the buffer. So what we're trying to do is if we had to relocate it, we would just cause more disturbance in that area. We'd like to try to keep the buffer, nice. We'd like to keep the trees even outside the buffer. We'd like to keep the land as much natural as we can.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
That brings up a good point. I mean, this is an existing driveway. It's been here for, how long has the driveway been here?
I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
Decades, years.
Well,
decades.
I've owned the property for 2.5 or 3 years.
Okay.
And So I have no idea.
But it's been there since you've owned it?
And I had no idea this would be an issue when I bought the property. I would not have bought it.
Well, we appreciate you trying to keep the driveway in the same place and not to disturb any of the other parts of the buffer. I'm inclined, since it is approved by TDEC, this is a condition where it's not new construction. If it was new construction in a new driveway that we were talking about here, I may be more inclined to do a three-sided and conform to the standards that we have, and in this case, it's an existing condition that we're going to improve. So the way maybe I'm looking at this is I'm trying to find a way to justify in my mind of, are we going to be leaving the site in a better condition? And if we are, is there a delta between the three-sided and the four-sided, considering that the four-sided is allowed by TDEC, which typically is our authority having jurisdiction and a few components that we use to analyze these cases. So that's kind of where my thinking is, but I'm just offering that for the commission as we work towards a motion. Mr. Michu, please.
I think our interpretation is this is a new development as they have applied for a building permit application to build this.
Okay.
But I understand you guys are making a motion. I just want to clarify.
Okay.
I'm just not seeing a hardship other than cost. And is it a negligible, are we killing the environment with a four-sided box? No, but it's in the regs, and that's part of the regs, and we have supplemental regs to TDEC, and it's unfortunate. I don't know if we have the authority to approve it. So it seems like you could put a span down the middle, a footer down the middle, and just put a cap and go on. But I'm sure there's a cost delta. But
yeah. Okay.
I haven't seen a mitigation plan or alternative site plan.
They have a mitigation plan associated with some additional trees at that little but I think it was maybe five to six trees, if I'm not mistaken, just right there.
Yes, and that was just I guess to kind of even just start the conversation, but that is an area where it's not in the floodplain, it's not in our construction. It gives us a nice area to put, it's sad, it's the only area that looked to be like a good area to put some trees. I know they're kind of bunched up, but it was more just for kind of looking at the grade and that stuff. That's why they was laid there. And I'll bring up again, the big hardship, I think that is constructability, which is a question you guys are having, but the other one is disturbance. We're trying to limit our disturbance in the stream as much as possible at this point.
Excavating out to submerge a box culvert is going to be a lot of disturbance.
It is, but again, to my understanding is it would be less. We're trying to decrease it as much as possible.
To echo my fellow commissioner, I think I struggle with this one. I hear the constructability, but when I hear that, I think the constructability aspect, it is constructible. And again, we don't want to leave things worse off, but I do believe the reg there is for a reason as it relates to the stream crossing. It's unfortunate that I think there was already some disturbance that probably shouldn't have been there to begin with. Understanding, I grew up out in the country as well, and I understand how things get done. So, but at the end of the day, when we're talking about constructability, I really think we're talking about the cost of the construction to do the three-sided culvert compared to what is being proposed.
Sure, I'll echo that too. I'll maybe add this, maybe there's an opportunity to not add a center support and span it 30 feet, steel or something. That may be where we're headed to recommend, not recommending any design criteria, but it's possible. Go ahead, I'll let you.
All the utilities, along with our sewer and everything, goes in the sides of this thing and above the 24-inch drain that goes across. When we did that, there was almost no water in that. It did not disturb hardly anything. The environmentalists, again, has determined that nothing on the 200 feet has the environmental problem other than the fact it is a stream. He called it a stream. I would call it just, a ditch. The ditch comes all the way from the schools and all that down to us, and the more that is built in those areas, the more water we get. And when we put that culvert in there, it worked fine and stayed fine until this last rain.
Okay, let me give you one more opportunity. Maybe you can help me with this.
The hydrologic determination just says otherwise.
Right. But
And there's a professional that submitted a scoring that is not borderline.
Okay,
It is
that was-
significantly higher than borderline.
Okay.
And so that's, I believe you, but at the same time, you've got professionals saying that they disagree. And so that's hard for me to vote against.
Well, it comes when it rains. It can't get out at the other end. It will go out eventually, and it does go down a lot eventually, but it's not operating. Our proposal too is, when we get ready for this, is to put a pump in and pump it so that at least our part up there that has a real small stream will take the water off into the other section. And that, because they have shown that that's basically what we do during construction, is pump the water. And we'd hit it when there's not rain and everything. We'd do it when the forecast is decent, where we're not having the flood water.
Looking at one of the other variance requests for the trees, are you proposing planting those in the woods? I'm not clear where the woods are.
When you get up on the hill, it's all wooded, or there's a lot of wooded area up there, up on the hill.
Yeah, so it would mix with the current woods. It may be in a little bit of a flat, a prayer or open grassed area, but it's near the woods or connected to the woods. So you can kind of see in that shot there.
Yeah, and why I'm asking that, I guess, as the landscape architect person on this committee is there, there may be better value in terms of plant life of doing something smaller and more of a plug where you're disturbing to provide that stability rather than planting trees in the woods that may not provide as much benefit as getting some of that understory, just seeing as much disturbance as is around in there and along those banks. I would recommend that you potentially look at that as being your planting strategy and provide a lot more value, I think, to the stream and the adjacent sides.
I think we'd be open to, if that was part of the conditions of this approval.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with the existing driveway staying in a buffer. And I don't know if that needs to come before, if they're required with the building permit to move that. But it's there.
Okay.
I think it caused more disturbance. You're almost just kind of, you're keeping a buffer on the other side as you're shifting that around.
My understanding, the way that we've seen these in the past, when it is new construction, you kind of have to look at what is existing and what is not, because it's not necessarily a renovation. I think, though, that existing structures, we've had a lot of back and forth in the commission. I think that existing structures we have looked at, that there's not further disturbance, so I understand what my fellow commissioner is saying there. And if I'm hearing you correctly, I think that the request, where I'm hearing a motion potentially going, is that the motion would be to allow for the existing drive as it is, the signing request that they are asking for. We haven't really discussed their request about mowing within the buffer, but maybe a denial of the four-sided culvert.
Do you mow out there?
Mow?
Yeah.
Yes.
I do.
Yeah, bush hog.
But I mean, like up next to in the woods?
Yeah, up in the woods, up above there, yes, around.
But where the buffer is on your exhibit, do you mow in there right now?
There's not much to mow. You're
Right.
talking
Yeah,
about
that's what I'm saying. I don't know if there's something we need to approve.
it's all trees and everything. all
Yeah, I don't
Weeds
see
and
you taking
gravel.
a bush hog in there.
You can't get one
Yeah.
on the slope where it comes off that hill quite.
Yeah, I mean, if we turn that down, I don't think that impacts you.
Where you see the trees along there, that is in a big slope going down the hill.
You can mow the crosshatch, you just can't mow
Up the top, yeah.
the purple.
Basically, yeah, we do what we can. There's part we can't mow.
Yeah.
Because of the trees and everything right there.
Yeah, I would.
I think the mowing and maintenance was mostly for the other side of the road, because there's a little bit portion of buffer that comes across the road. Yeah, they'd want to continue to mow that. I don't know if they have to mow on the west side of the road, going toward the stream.
I would highly I'd recommend that you just don't mow in the buffers and these it's just going to be better benefit, and we would, prefer not to. I would prefer not to do that.
Yeah, I think your I think we're working through a motion, but your hydraulic determination is hurting you. This is a narrow site. The water is mostly ponded up within your site boundaries. It's been standing. It's received some life forms. It's growing algae. It's scoring you higher. I think if they went to the adjacent properties to the left and to the right and done a more comprehensive analysis of the stream to make its determination and its score, you might have had a different output. I don't know. I can't guarantee that, but
It says there's fish in it, but you're saying it's dry at times, so we're just getting different.
Let's see, I didn't catch exactly what you're saying.
The primary field indicators on the report says that there was a presence of fish.
The guy that filled that out told me that the fish species that are there exist because insects land, like mosquitoes and stuff. That's what he told me. I don't know if that's in any kind of summary, but.
And he also said that any mud puddle gets your.
and that's what I'm saying. So like on your neighboring properties, is there water in the stream?
On the downside, there's a lot of water. It's flooded.
Okay.
And it's all because of the blocked. I think they could, if they got that blocked area taken care of, I don't think there'd be any water on the property hardly. Just a little stream, maybe.
And we, and kind of like, as we've explained, we can only look at the facts in front of us and what the condition is today, and the information, one being the hydrologic determination.
And I want to get some clarification. What I'm understanding is he's saying it's dry when it wasn't blocked. But was that hydrological determination was done while there was standing water?
All standing water.
So it does add, I'm again,
The mud puddle
I understand a
was full.
professional and what he said. I just want to know the two, what we're saying are the two different time zone or times of the events. But again, I understand a professional.
Yeah, and we can only go off what's been submitted and what the professional says from that determination.
I think with that, we're working towards a motion.
Yeah, I would move, and I'll walk through each of them, and move to allow the variance request to have the existing drive as it is. I would deny the request for a four-sided culvert in lieu of putting a three-sided culvert, which my understanding would comply with the regulations. I would deny the request to mow the buffer zone. Is there any other, let's see. Oh, approve the request for the no signage. And anything else I'm missing?
I would think if essentially we're just approving the driveway to remain, that I don't think it's necessary to provide the 5 trees to mitigate the.
I agree. And in light of that and the adjustments to the variance request, we would say the mitigation that was proposed is not necessary.
Okay, we have a motion.
Can I ask?
I think we've got to wait till.
Let us finish second, and there'll be a time for discussion, and I'm happy to ask.
Thank you.
So we have a motion. Is there a second? Okay, seconded by Commissioner Oliver. Any other discussion, and can we open it up back to the?
I would, well, as a part of the discussion, I thought that I would be allowed to ask
Yeah,
if
you're in a
necessary.
second, you're in a posture where you
Yeah.
can continue to discuss. It's fine.
Okay.
I'll give the floor to the applicant to,
So I just want to know the reason that we are kind of, you guys are, the motion is to reject the three-sided, or the four-sided structure is that we don't have a hardship. Because again, the only I'm just trying to eliminate disturbance as our hardship. So I feel like we do have a hardship here, but again, everyone has a different opinion. I just want to understand the rejection, a little more clarity on that.
I'd say the regs are written, disturbance is short-term, the regs are written in a more of a long-term manner. And we just need to follow the regs if there's not a hardship other than, the minimizing disturbance.
And I have a question for Mr. Mishu. If this was a wet weather conveyance, would four-sided structure have been acceptable?
Yeah, just pipe.
Absolutely.
That's where we were trying to guide you, is that the objective data that we have in front of us scores this as a stream, and it's high. This trouble is that your property is narrow and the water is present on, I think, the significant width of this stream that is on your property. That's why I was asking the question of how it is up and downstream, and if there's an opportunity to maybe make a larger representation of the sample size. But we have to go with what's in front of us. And so we have a motion, it's been seconded.
yeah, and just to be very direct, for me, the exceptional hardship is what I struggle with. We have cases that have further defined what exceptional hardship was from the Tennessee Court of Appeals, and financial hardship alone with nothing more is not sufficient. And so I just want to directly answer that question, at least for my vote as a part of the commission.
And that directly ties to constructability. That's generally a cost-driven kind of dilemma. And so, go ahead. I'll be happy to recognize you.
The footings in that to do the three-sided is going to take at least 40% of going across it, just to get the footings to carry the weight. And we are leaving the thing much further along and much better than it is now.
I understand, but that's still a cost-driven issue because you could use micropiles and reduce the size of your foundation to handle the subsurface conditions, and there's a way to do it. It's a cost issue, and I understand it. So that's, I guess my question.
There's a motion.
Yeah, there's a motion. We have a second, and I hate to. Yeah, I was going to use the D word, which I don't want to do. So we have a motion, we have a second, and happy to entertain a vote. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, motion carries as it's been recorded by the commissioner. Okay, thank you. All right, folks, that's the last item on our agenda today. Logan, do we have any other business?
I have a question. I didn't have it on the agenda. I know a couple of months ago, we had gone over some revisions to our stormwater regs. And I just wanted to get an update on kind of where those revisions stand. I think our latest, 2021 is our latest revision, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's correct. I had presented some, I guess, my markup of it. It would be good to have other people's thoughts on it, so I don't know if I can maybe send those back out.
Yeah, I think that would be great, because if I'm recalling correctly, it was a couple months ago, and we walked through that markup, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't know if I saw an update since then.
I didn't send anything else since then.
Okay, and didn't know if the commission, we've had some interesting cases come in front of us for the past. Yeah, and I think it would be good to look at it again before it's finalized to see, in light of kind of the discussions we've had over the last couple of months, if there's any other revisions that we would suggest or like to make prior to putting this, because I know once it's issued, it goes out and there's costs associated with that, and making sure everything is updated, so.
Support that.
And we're constantly trying to address, the public's concerns and things like that. One thing that we did with this last case on the letter that they sent out, we actually put a QR code on there to link to the plan set for e-permit. So, you know, with that case last month that we had multiple people write in, they actually ran it by some people that had written in for that case and said, what do you think about this? You know, and they were pretty happy with something like that.
Speaking of that, you know what would be interesting? In the era of QR codes, if our stormwater management notice, and this goes to Commissioner Simpson's conversation and I earlier about notice, of having up-to-date information in case there is a deferral of that case. You know, we always put a date on the signs, but if it gets deferred, there's not necessarily a re-notice that goes out, to my understanding. But if the sign had a QR code posted on it that somebody could take a picture of and receive the up-to-date information, then that wouldn't that may help solve that issue of the era of envelopes, which I don't really open all my envelopes that come in. Maybe if it has a Metro stamp on it.
Yeah, I don't think it would prevent it because it's just been a long-term practice of how we do things, and there's still like a generation of people who just don't do QR codes. I mean, I think even if I go to a restaurant, I'm sort of like, can I have a menu? You know, I mean, I just kind of want to, I guess it's an age thing. But I think it wouldn't, I think it wouldn't, I don't think that it would be a replacement, but I think it's a great idea that, you know, someone, if they're walking, they can hit the QR code like they are on our most recent agendas so that there's a clear path. Just though the only thing that I've cautioned Logan about when we were putting it on our documentation is just to make sure that it goes to the right place. And sometimes those QR codes can be a little wonky. But yeah, I think it's a great idea, but I don't think that it would be a one-for-one kind of thing. Although I think as much notice as we can give is always better. So I'm down for it. It's good.
And one of the reasons is I think that we have a lot of very thoughtful discussion, and I don't want notice to take up valuable time in lieu of some of the more substantive things that we hear. So that's one of the reasons I didn't know if it was something we should talk about and get ahead of. One other thing, in light of some of our other cases, I've been doing some deep dives in our regs, and as a part of our hearing procedure, it's 5115 subsection 3, part A. It talks about how the director of WMS or its designee shall furnish reasons for rejection or give a written statement. I actually really appreciate hearing from MWS staff. I'm not an engineer, so kind of really hearing from the staff as to why something doesn't meet the reg prior to the applicant. I think you all have been doing a really great job giving us some additional comments ahead of time. I just want to say that I appreciate that and encourage it, and I find it very helpful in my review. So it may be something, I don't know how the other commissioners feel, that is a part of our procedures if we did want to hear from like MWS staff prior to the applicant to kind of help get us sort of grounded in the issue or the request in front of us. Some of our applicants do a really good job outlining every request. Some don't do as well, and I think it's probably because they don't have experience in front of this commission, or, you know, they may not have the means to have the big staff that others do when they come in and present something, but just a thought.
Yeah, I in echoing that, it's a lot of work on the front end for the staff, and that's something that, you know, it's a resources issue, but I understand where you're going with that because the planning commission is you know, similar in that to what you're asking for because they give a recommendation. The difference between that and this commission though is that the planning commission has a legal obligation to give a recommendation. Actually, the staff doesn't, but it greatly helps when it gets before the commission because they are obligated to make a recommendation.
Yeah, this one is if desired. I'm just saying, I understand
I
it's
agree.
not the same.
It would be a lot easier if you had those comments in beforehand. It would just be a matter of everyone getting on the same page.
Is it possible to even consider, because I think there are some presentations we've seen that are really clear and spell it out, make everything much more efficient. Is it possible to even have some resources, like an outline that's like helps. I mean, I don't know how many people come before us that have never done this before, and you say, put together a presentation. I don't know how much is given to them about what is in that, but it could even be, we have an outline you can follow or not follow of what's included in it that helps you understand what's important within the presentation, some of it being the variance request, some of it being the hardship, and because the ones that outline it make it much more efficient, I think, for all of everyone to understand and go through it, and those that don't, they're just a lot of back and forth, and it could be that they just are not familiar with the process. I don't know. It could just be a resource that's kind of put forth.
I'd like to recognize Mr. Mishi, who's been patiently waiting there.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Chair. So back in 2021, we did make some changes to the checklist. The biggest thing was to digitize it, to make it where you can complete it through PDF, and we don't have to worry about what language they write the application in. Part of that also came with the COVID time, where we tried to make it to where we could have things that were easily presentable to the commission and easily to develop by the applicant. And we also adjusted our sign policy because a council member had changed the ordinance that says, hey, we shall comply, and make our requirements very similar to how BZA handles their applications. So we modeled it kind of like a BZA. When you do a public notice, and I'm not an attorney, but usually that public notice that initially gets sent out usually handles the notification part where everybody's here. They say, oh, it's deferred, and they track it. My only issue with the QR code on the actual signs is that we actually, and Logan, correct me if I'm wrong, we actually tell them what the sign should look like, and we give them the verbiage, and we give it to them. I do not know how we do that and get them to copy and paste it on the signs to where it may or may not work. But I 100% agree. Anything to where we could make it easy for the citizens to obtain information is always a positive thing, provided that it's not an extenuous burden on staff to make it happen. And I think this is the right time, as I don't recognize any commission member today that was back here in 21. So I think this is a great time to probably do some updates. And then as far as the recommendations, historically we have not said we recommend approval or recommend disapproval on any application. We have recently shifted, and we have adjusted our comments, not to say approve or disapprove, but we have, as you noticed, we don't really think this is suitable for approval, but if you were to approve, then maybe beef up the mitigation or something similar. We would be more than happy to give you more of a staff feeling, which usually follows the regulation. As this one came through, Vice Chair Fulmer said, I don't know if it's a big deal leaving that driveway in place if it already exists. Do we really object to that? Probably not. It's probably, if you remove it and you do a new one, you may be disturbing more. We'd be more than happy to make sure that we provide you more accurate information on the stance and why something doesn't really follow the stance. But we'll have to double check with Ms. Terra to make sure that we're not going above and beyond our requirements. But we'd be more than happy to update checklists. We'd be more than happy to make things more readily available to the public with certain conditions. And we'd be more than happy to provide you the best feedback possible from staff.
It's helpful. Thank you.
I hate to micromanage anyone, but if there's a suggested order going through the thing, there's sometimes I'm scrolling through and I just can't find something buried in the packet.
We talked a little bit about that, I think, a while back, and maybe the opportunity to add a 01, a 02 in front of the file name, but I don't want to, again, complicate or add.
Well, I think if Logan resends out kind of where we are on the latest, because I believe some of the suggestions that we were making would involve the packet itself, or we may have already recently done that, but I think we could take a look at that at the same time with the regs.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
We think You all are doing a really good job, by the way. So don't take this.
I just wanted to encourage what is, it's been the last couple months, but I've appreciated the comments ahead. It helps me frame, it helps me understand what some of the issues are for those of us that may not have some of the technical background as others on the commission.
Okay. With that, any other topics to discuss before we adjourn? Logan?
I don't think so.
Anybody else? Great having you, Commissioner Abbott. Thanks for being participatory in the first meeting, coming out with good feedback. So looking forward to more. With that, I'll create a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. So moved.
All right.
All right.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.